And it also should be recording now as well.
Okay.
Yep, we already have people coming on.
Cool. As people come in, if they could maybe just say in the chat room, just say your name, company, if you get a moment, just so we can see who you are. It's always nice to know. Okay, Paige.
All right, we'll get started in a minute or so, give people a couple more minutes to come in, and then we'll kick things off. And as Wayne asked, as people continue to come in, if you could just send your name and the company you work for, and if you want to include your position as well, I think that would be just some good information to start off with too, just to have. Thank you. All right, so we'll get started. So first, I just want to say good afternoon to everybody. I hope everyone's doing well and staying safe and healthy. So my name's Ryan. I'm one of the vice presidents of the Emerging Leaders Committee, joined by my colleague, Tori Mitchell, as well, who is also one of the co-chairs and VPs on the Emerging Leaders Committee. So we're real excited to have this event today. Usually we strive to have 3 career development events every year. And it seems like every year there's always something that comes up that bars us from having that 3rd event. So this year we are not going to let that happen. So we're having this one webinar based this year, just to kick this one off. So we want to thank everyone for joining today's webinar entitled Developing the Agile HR Leaders, Top 7 Practices to Transform You and Your Organization. During today's presentation, if you have any questions, please feel free to send them via question box on your screen, and we will read them aloud to the speaker at the end of the webinar. If you have not already done so, please follow us on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Don't forget to check out our upcoming events. If you want to register for any of these sessions, you can register online at www.phillysherm.org. Where in addition to our great events and resources that we have for emerging leaders, there's also other great resources available just more broadly with Philly SHRM. Now, if you are not already a member of Philly SHRM, just remember that members receive a reduced or free event registration fees. There's big discounts on Philly SHRM Symposium, personal connections to the local HR and business community, access to our members only resource area, and this includes membership pricing, directory, access to our top leaders in our region, and a chance to make a difference in our community, and lots more. So before we kick things off, please allow me to introduce Dr. Kelly Grace, who is the Academic Director at Temple University's Department of Human Resources. And I just want to say that I am an alma mater of that group, so I'm biased towards Temple HR. So I always love having that partnership ability with them. Kelly, it's great to have you. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me here. I am Kelly Grace, and I'm speaking on behalf of the faculty and staff of the Department of Human Resource Management at Temple University's Fox School of Business. We are delighted to be able to support this Emerging Leaders event. I'm a faculty member at the Fox School, and I'm also academic director of the Master of Science in Human Resource Management program, as was mentioned earlier. The HRM department, our group has 2 primary purposes. The first purpose is to push the envelope of our knowledge by exploring important leadership topics, such as leading with inclusion, toxic management, and trust in leaders. My colleagues working in these areas are world-class scholars. Our second purpose is education. We offer a SHRM test preparation class for those pursuing professional credentialing. We also offer a Master of Science in HRM, a program that's near and dear to my heart. Our program's goal is to equip rising professionals such as yourself with knowledge of advanced practices in critical HRM areas and understanding of how those practices affect organizational success and the ability to influence that success. It's a flexible program, 10 courses, 30 credits, exclusively online. It can be completed in as few as 13 months. You can take up to 6 years, depending on how the pandemic ebbs and flows. Some need more time than others. By the way, we have been entirely online since 2016 using virtual technologies for meeting students in a classroom emulated environment. We've done this before. If you're interested in pursuing higher educational options, please don't hesitate to reach out. My name is on the screen. I am Kelly Grace, and you can find me through LinkedIn, Temple University. I'm out there. So on behalf of my colleagues, we wish you good health and hope you enjoyed this virtual event.
Thank you, Dr. Grace, and thank you to Temple University for your support of Philly SHRM. So today's webinar will feature Wayne Tarkin. He is a Chief HR Officer and Senior Advisor who has 20+ years of experience working with Chief HR Officers, CEOs, and business leaders and startups in the development and implementation of innovative people and business strategies. Wayne, thank you for joining us today. I appreciate your time and hope you're doing well. Would you mind kicking things off for us here?
No, absolutely. Good afternoon, emerging HR leaders. Hope everyone is having a great day. You're in for a treat, I think. Steve and I have worked hard to prepare this, and let me just kind of move forward here. You know, we live in some interesting times nowadays. It's kind of the best of times and worst of times, I think. The worst of times is, you know, we've had all these plans about our careers, our organizations, and everything has kind of been destroyed or inhibited by the COVID-19 virus. Even before that, when we would talk with emerging HR leaders, they would share their frustrations around lack of promotion opportunities, promises made about assignments didn't work out, a variety of things that kind of inhibited them from achieving their goals. And so this current crisis actually made things worse. On the positive side, as there is with typically a crisis, it creates a lot of opportunities for emerging leaders to kind of step up and assume new roles or different roles. Organizations are really desperate for new ideas and how to make things better, and they're really, they're looking for help. But you have to know how. It's how do you break through? How do you make an impact in the organization? So we designed this program to help people like yourself who aspire to grow and advance and do other things in the organization. So let's start out by, asking a question. What is Agile HR? Well, people used to say that's IT, right? And I say, it used to be. It started in IT, but it's really not anymore. I describe it this way. So, when I meet people, I say, I'm an Agile HR coach. What's that? I mean, people get confused, and I was confused for a while too. But and I tell them, think about those meetings you have, those recurring meetings on Monday morning staff meetings or a workday project where you meet and you meet and you meet and nothing gets done, where people blame each other. It's the same agenda all the time. It's frustrating. In some ways, it's kind of like root canal. The only issue with root canal is once you get it fixed, the pain goes away. Not with these meetings. And I've seen a lot of people become not depressed, but very sad and demotivating when you have these meetings. So Agile has a way of kind of fixing that. It has a way of reducing long meetings to short ones and incrementally improving. And we're gonna talk to you about that as a way to be helpful. So let's do a little bit of a experiment here now. And I'm going to ask you to enter comments in the chat room. So what is an emerging leader? Take some time. What does it mean to you? So we can kind of have a definition here. If you could take a few minutes to do that. See my chat room here. This is where you guys, okay. See, everybody should have availability to chat room. If you could just put some comments in there, what you think. What's an emerging leader for you? To you, what does it mean? Okay. Steve, what is it? What do you see in there? What resonates with you?
Yeah, I see some great stuff here. I love the one about the idea that it's about emerging leader is to someone who has high potential to become a leader in the organization or the leader of a team, someone who's dedicated, ambitious, enthusiastic, and motivating. That's a wonderful example, I think, of the potential of emerging leaders. I also love the one, someone who shows initiative and presents new ideas that they can take the lead on. Great ideas coming through. A leader is a leader who is adaptive to changing circumstances to produce more and better work and accomplish great things. I think this group really is very talented. They've got the heads in the right place. Really some great insights.
That's good. Keep entering comments. I should have more. Okay, so hold on to those thoughts a moment. We're going to come back to them, but let me kind of review a little bit how we found these, how we discovered some of these principles that I think work. So if you can see me from a few years ago, when I had hair, I was always a builder, always a tinkerer. I like to put things together. It's just always been who I am. Tiger Woods spends 10,000 hours hitting golf balls, and Wayne Tarkin spends 10,000 hours putting things together and figuring things out. And so I've always been curious about things, how things work, and being involved in HR technology. I was always frustrated when we spent all this time and money on technology implementations and never really worked. And again, I've been doing this for over 20 years, and it was always a source of frustration. And why is that? Why is it that we can't get things done to make it successful? So, 2008, 9 were bad times for a lot of us, although it pales in comparison to today's situation. But the Great Recession, was really impactful to me being a consultant. It was tough making a living. I got to be honest with you. Didn't know where money was coming in as a consultant. What I did was discretionary, and not many people were hiring consultants in the area that I was focused on. And I got a call from IBM. They were looking for someone who had a little bit of IT experience, a lot of HR experience. I said, that's perfect for me. Went on board, and sometimes when what they tell you about a job isn't exactly the way it works out. Well, this situation, it was a little bit of HR and a lot of IT. And so I became a Scrum Master. So a Scrum Master is a term for, in an Agile environment, the project leader that leads the Scrum. And it was new to me. I was dealing with, programmers from developers from India and China and Germany and things like that. But I got better at it, and I embraced it. And we were working on very, very large enterprise level applications for companies like General Electric and Lockheed Martin, MD Anderson. And this is very complex software. But I saw that the Agile process had a way of breaking something big into smaller pieces and then fixing a little bit at a time. And I said to myself, wow, this is the first time I really had seen a project methodology work. It actually made it successful where it hadn't been before. And I said, more of HR is project related. Can we really, maybe we can use it in HR. And so I continued to think about that. In 2016, I got involved with a group on the West Coast called CREATE. It was a consortium to reimagine employment alternatives and things like that. Big companies, LinkedIn, Workday, Amazon, Gates Foundation, who are thinking, HR leaders thinking about the future of HR. And that's where I came up with the idea about, developing an Agile HR role as a program manager inside an organization. And, had a couple interim HR roles after that. And then 2018 went full bore and started to focus on this. And again, I would tell people, I'm in Agile HR, and they'd say, what is that? And I said, IT. And I said, no, it's more than that. It's a little bit of IT, but a lot of leadership, a lot of other pieces. And I racked my brains thinking, how do we get back through? As Steve always says, transformation is linguistic. And so what language can we use to help people understand this? And we had a lot of different metaphors. We had a house of Agile, had a great foundation and walls and roof, and that got nowhere. And then other acronyms. And so finally, one day I was listening to Ginny Rometty, who was the CEO at IBM when I was there, and she was on the Financial News Network talking about EBITDA. EBITDA, for those in finance, it's earnings before income taxes, depreciation, amortization. I said, wow, that makes a lot of sense. And it was, I had this epiphany. I didn't really plan it. All of a sudden, everything fit. All the principles that I had been thinking about made it into this EBITDA model. And I said, we have EBITDA for finance. Now we have EBITDA for Agile HR. And so let me review some of these. Let me introduce these to you. Okay. There's 7 practices. As you can see, some are tactical, some are strategic, but they all kind of work together. So experimentation. We've entered what I call the age of experimentation. We've taken everybody from their office and threw them home. We've adopted what I call a ready, fire, aim philosophy. We didn't do it perfectly the first time. We're still fixing it up, but we tried it. And a core element of Agile is doing things first, get started, make some errors, adjust to keep going. And so congratulations, you're all in the age of experimentation. So you're practicing one piece of EBITDA right now. The second piece is breaking big things into small pieces. You know, if you're working on a puzzle, 1,000 pieces, you don't put all of them together at the same time. You just kind of create pockets here and then pockets here and then pockets here. So you're breaking the big thing into small pieces, and then you're incrementally, iteratively improving it. And that's the big piece of Agile, is breaking things down and doing incremental improvements. Okay, time. Well, I worked on lots of projects, it took years and months, and not much got done. And so my view is the longer it takes to finish something, the less likely it's going to be successful. And so Agile approaches this by saying, instead of a 6-month project or year project, let's break it into small pieces, which we call sprints, 2 to 3 week increments, where we do a small piece of it, then we do another small piece of it, and another small piece of it until it's finished. So we incrementally do things until they scale within a 2 to 3 week time period. Now, why is that helpful? Well, people see successes. You demonstrate progress every 2 to 3 weeks versus waiting 6 months. And so it helps people feel more engaged. It helps people feel more a part of things. And it maintains momentum. It helps senior leaders who have spent a lot of money and time on this see some results. Typically, organizations, there's not a lot of patience around big ticket items that cost a lot of money. But if you can show incremental improvements every 2 to 3 weeks, that helps. T and teams. Self-guided teams have been around for a while, but Agile has a way of promoting roles in those teams that really make it successful. And so teams are important. Servant leadership, facilitating the teams. Steve and I have kind of come up with a different term. We call it shared leadership. The team and the leader shares the leadership in terms of having things get done. And the last thing, always be communicating with customers. This is one area I think a lot of HR leaders have a challenge, is that we do great things, but it's for HR. It's not really for the business. And I can't tell you how many times I've talked to a leader where we've done something and if they felt great about it, but it wasn't appreciated by the business. And so what Agile does, it makes you communicate all the time, constantly with your customer. So there's no surprises. Everything works the way it needs to go. Okay. I just want to illustrate one piece. If you take anything away from the session, and I'm sure there's a lot, but it's breaking down big things in how we do things. So if you look at the boulder on the left, it's really hard to move, but it needs to go up the hill. So how do you do that? Well, you just break it down to small pieces. As you can see, what we've done with the boulder on the left is we broke it down into smaller pieces and we incrementally built it up. So imagine if we had stopped halfway on that wall. We still would have had a wall, not as high we wanted, but we still would have had something. That's the big problem when you have, in projects, a key person gets hit by a bus or leaves the organization, we start all over. I don't know how many times I've talked to people where they spend all this time and effort and someone leaves or priorities change and you go back to square one. Whereas Agile promotes sustainable improvements. So you may have half a wall, but you'll have a wall and you can build on top of it. So that's one of the key elements I think that people need to take away from this. So let's do a poll here. As you think about the 7 elements, some of practice of Agile, which appeals to you? Which you think makes more sense from your perspective, or perhaps you could use in your organization? Tori, you want to? Okay, take a few minutes to do that if you could. Okay. Okay, you want to see some of the results, Tori, if we could?
Sure, I will end it now.
Okay.
Everyone get your last
All right.
bit of answers in. I still see some people entering.
Yeah, that's enough. Take your time.
All right, looks like we're good.
Okay. Ah, that's great.
Looks like your message got through, Wayne.
Yeah, I think so. Did you talk to the people ahead of time, Steve? Did they did you show them the slides?
No.
No. Yeah, I think this is a really nice distribution. And I think the key is the first two, experimentation and breaking things down into smaller pieces. All right. So we've talked about some of the agile practices, but what we found the hard way, I think, through some of the steps is that, agile is a way of thinking, but it requires an element of leadership to be successful. You can't work without good leadership practices. And I think, Steve, you want to take us through how you discovered some of the leadership capabilities we need?
Sure. Thanks, Wayne. Hello, everybody. This is Steve Hart. I'm thrilled to be here with you today. Wayne, would you move on? Thank you. So as Wayne said, agile really is a way of thinking, right? But we also think, as Wayne said, that it requires some dexterity of leadership in order to make it work. And I always love working with emerging leaders. The heart of my consulting coaching practice is with emerging leaders. I think it's an area of great interest to me. So I always love to start with this question whenever I meet with an emerging leader who is being coached, and get you to think about what it is that drives you as a leader. So I'm going to give you about 50 seconds to, on your own, and you don't have to write this down or send it in. I just want you to have a little thought experiment of your own. Ask yourself, why should anyone be led by you? What are the qualities you bring to your leadership? Maybe write them down for yourself, and we'll refer to this maybe a little bit later. Why should anyone be led by you? Hopefully what you've written down is some personal reflections on how you're doing, but hopefully you have some confidence that you're progressing well on your journey, because at the heart of implementing Agile effectively is a leader who has credibility. So Wayne, if we could move on.
Yeah.
I've spent a lot of my time looking into the minds of leaders, and I've done that for more than 30 years now. And I've discovered that the very best leaders that I've worked with do at least two things brilliantly. They do a lot of things brilliantly, but these two things are sort of foundational to the great leaders that I've worked with. And it takes a habit to get these things down and done well. So emerging leaders are a great place to start with this. There's two things that they do brilliantly. First is they have a passion for the work that they do and a drive for the great results that they get. So a passion for the work and results. The second thing is that they care equally passionately about the people that they lead. Now, I call this mastering the duality of leadership. And believe it or not everybody can do it. Let's take a look at how this might work. So yeah, maybe I would hope many of you have seen this before. It's a picture. How many of you, by just raising a hand, see a young woman in this picture? How many of you see an old woman in this picture? I'm not seeing the hand raise icon, so I don't know what the proportion of that is. But hopefully what you see here is you can see both an old and a young woman in this very same picture, an old woman in the drawing. The capacity to hold two potentially opposing things in your head, yet move seamlessly between them in response to the situation you face, is the essence of mastering the duality of leadership. So to help bring this to some clarity, let's look at a metaphor I created some time ago to help you understand what we mean by that. So I call this the warrior and the artist. And I discovered this duality theory when I was, in fact, a special ed teacher in a boarding school in England. I worked in a very intense situation. I actually lived on the campus and had a house, or a flat, as we called it, apartment, you might know it as, on the school grounds. And I noticed that the very best teachers that I worked with in this very intense situation, because for these kids in this school, this was the last stop before prison. We had to be transformational in our work with them, otherwise they were going for a very bad outcome. But I noticed something very special about the teachers that I worked with. The ones that could reach the kids most effectively and had the ability to transform them, had this ability to be both hard driving and holding them accountable for the work that they did, while at the same time displaying awful amounts of energy, empathy, and care for the path that they were on. So this going seamlessly between what I called their warrior and artist selves, this ability to hold that duality in their mind and be able to call upon the best version of themselves in response to the situation that they were facing. It was really incredible to see them go seamlessly from that. The teachers that failed were the ones who were the warrior all of the time, or were all the artist all of the time. The ones that were successful had this curious ability to be able to go seamlessly between their warrior self and their artist self. They knew how to make that transition, and they knew when one was called for over the other. So let's explore this just a little bit further. Let's look at the language of the warrior. Now, these are not my words here. I've done a presentation like this, which takes a lot longer than the time that we have available today. But normally I invite my audience to explore this notion of warrior and artist a bit more. And I say, let's put some words down on the page that help us understand the mindset of the warrior. And these are the words that most often come up when I do this exercise in real and with an audience. Disciplined, taker, fighter, guardian, commander, rigid, combatant, champion, competitor. Those are the types of words. This is the language of the warrior leader. It was assembled from a number of presentations I've done of this topic over the years. And you can see that these are very recognizable traits and behaviors and responsibilities of leadership. However, if this is the only set of things that you use for every situation, you're at least going to be wrong half of the time in the way that you lead people. So let's look at the other side, the language of the artist. What we see here is a different set of words, the same idea though: composer, cultivator, flexible, versatile, a genius, a collaborator, virtuoso, sensitive, and vulnerable. You can see that these traits, behaviors, responsibilities of leadership are really important skills for leaders. Again, though, if we lead only from this perspective, we're not fulfilling the full potential. So let's, I did a little 2x2 matrix to help you sort of see how this comes together. So let's look at how that looks. So if we put these elements together and we look at the best side of ourselves as a warrior, the best sides of ourselves as an artist, and we combine them together, we find that space where we create credible, adaptive, skilled situational leadership. It's called the warrior artist duality matrix. And it helps us to understand it helps us to understand the intersection or the duality, moving seamlessly between the dualities of leadership. So let's move on and see this a bit. So how this might look like in action. The integration of this would be sort of a warrior calling upon the best controlled situation of him or herself, but also being open to the potential to be spontaneous. Going between a fighter and a creator, a conqueror or an observer, a defender or a relator, disciplined and flexible, protective yet vulnerable, competitive and a collaborator. Moving seamlessly between these states of mind, this way of thinking, this way of interacting with people in response to the situations one finds yourself in, is really the central issue of mastering the duality of leadership. And when that happens effectively, this is what shows up. We start to see warrior artists in action are both courageous in action and sensitive to the impact that they have on others. They are both adept at difficult conversations and yet enable and develop people. They're both champion causes and give and receive feedback and do that often. They both drive for results and they forge for effective relationships. They're both capable of acting independently and being an engaged, proactive collaborator. They both act decisively and inclusively when making decisions. And they both take risk and is reflective and open to learning and change. So these are sort of just a few examples of things in action. And what I've noticed about the leaders that I've worked with over the years is that when they put these things together and they're coached correctly on being sensitive and aware and capable of mastering this duality, they report that they have better quality conversations with the people that they lead. Their people that they lead say that they appear more open and authentic. They appeal to both the head and the heart of the people that they lead. They have a significant amount of ability to engage people. They create fellowship. They achieve sustainable growth. And most importantly, I think, is they build trust and credibility with the people that they lead. So in effect, warrior artist leaders appropriately, effortlessly, and seamlessly navigate the dualities of leadership to break through the barriers that they face and earn the trust and respect of those that they lead. Now, we took this concept, this idea of warrior artist leadership into our program at Penn, where we're teaching this, the Agile leader. And I spent most of last year in preparation, since Wayne is the technical architect of the Agile principles. He asked me to come up with what are the leadership principles that might make this come together holistically. So I spent the summer going through a lot of books, but I found a wonderful book called Strategic Doing, 10 Skills for Agile Leadership by Morrison, Hutchinson, Nilsson, Fadden, and Franklin. They're all at the they're at Purdue University. And when you buy this book, you get access to a rich resource library of additional information and research that I think is really incredible. So I highly recommend the book. It's very readable. But in the book, they point out 10 strategic doing principles of leading Agile work in a meaningful way. And when I looked at these 10, I saw in the way that they were written that it really combines the best of what a warrior and artist leader might have to do. Let's just take a look at these for a second. Create and maintain a safe space for deep, focused conversation. That's very much, I think, on the artist side of things, the ability to be able to understand what it is that your team needs and create a viable space for them to have open and transparent conversations and be able to speak what's on their mind. Framing a conversation with the right question, very much an artist-like idea. Identify your assets, including the hidden ones. We found hidden assets to be a critical, important part. What's below the surface of the people that you work with that could be contributive to the things that they could bring to your project right now? Very much an artist capability. But linking and leveraging assets to identify new opportunities is very much maybe a warrior approach, right? Finding those opportunities to forge ahead and be able to use them in a meaningful way. The big easy is a term the authors use for helping to decide between alternatives that you have in terms of a decision making. Very much a warrior-like activity, being able to sort of put these things out and be very objective about them and be able to then communicate what it is that we need to do to move forward. Converting your ideas to outcomes with measurable characteristics is both a warrior and an artist skill, right? The creating of the ideas and converting them very much on the artist side, but the measurable characteristics is going very much tapping into the warrior psyche. Starting slowly to go fast, but start, very much a sort of a warrior thing. They want to get going. They want to move on things. They want to be able to take action and get some result. Draft short-term action plans that include everyone. Both a warrior and an artist is required in order to do that well. The 30-30 meetings to review is more of a discipline of being able to have connectedness with people involved in the project so that there's a clarity of understanding and that we are collectively making decisions. Very much, again, a warrior artist feature. And finally, nudge, connect, and promote to reinforce new habits. Very much, again, I think, both a warrior and an artist capability. So those were the things that we did. We wanted to connect a way of conceptualizing the leadership component that goes along with the successful implementation of Wayne's 7 principles of Agile. And so we combine those together, and that's what we've spent the, in fact, last night was our last night of our class together for the last 14 weeks, teaching this to some students at Penn.
Cool. So, how we lead them back? So if we look on the plane, the picture on the left, this is where life was like in April or March, I should say, as everybody went out of the organizations. And God willing, this will be what it looks like probably in June or July. And so, you know, we went through the experiment of shifting everybody to a virtual setting. Now, the majority of people are going to come back. Some will be remote, but I would suspect that most companies will bring people back. And so, you know, how do you lead them to the normal or the new normal? Steve, what do you think about return to status? What do you think some of the challenges are going to be?
Well, clearly, you know, you think about some of the things in the strategic doing about creating the safe space, right? I go immediately to that because I think people are going to be returning to work with, I think, a little bit of trepidation and fear, maybe some excitement, but I think creating that safe space for people to be able to return to their work, to speak out about what their concerns are, to speak openly about what they might need in terms of the workplace. I think that immediately comes to my mind, Wayne, as sort of a number one concern.
Okay. Yeah, I think, you know, that whole flow of work, the cadence, right? You know, we do budgeting certain times a year, we do performance reviews certain times a year, all that's kind of been discombobulated, right? And so how we get back to normal and handle those things is going to be a big challenge, right? It just, you know, it'd be interesting times, put it that way.
I think another thing, Wayne, is that we're going to be very much feeling like we're compelled to make the decisions for people about the return to work, or when it's not about the opening of the country, but literally when work reopens. How about if I think we might be remiss if we don't make that more of an inclusive action on behalf of an organization? Why don't we find a way now, while we're still in this lockdown kind of condition, to say playfully to our fellow employees, you know, once we do have a concern or an opportunity to return to work, what might be some things we need to be considerate of? And get those on the table early before people are actually back in, so you can address them before the day event occurs.
No, absolutely. You know, one of the challenges, all this stuff is, you know, we're going to need to change behaviors. A lot of our systems, most of our systems have been developed to, you know, in terms of budgeting, planning, talent review is all based on a whole different set of rules, and now we're changing it. So I know that you've had a lot of experience with change models. Can you share with us, you know, a model you think might be effective for HR leaders on the call to really embrace and maybe use in their own organizations?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's move ahead. So at heart, you know, it seems to me that every agile implementation or transformation does involve some aspect of change. So it's essentially, while it's a project management method, I also think it's a change method as well. It sort of forces people into. And for the purpose of our class, I got a lot of change models, and maybe all of you have change models that you refer to too. But this is one I love in particular. It's by Klaus Jensen is a organizational psychologist who did a lot of work around the mindset that people have when they think about change. And he says that people's mindset tends to exist in 4 different rooms. And the interesting thing is these are not fixed states necessarily, they are movable. But the reality is that when you're faced with a change, the range of people in the team that you might be leading at the time might exist in any one of these 4 rooms in the moment you introduce it. So let's just take a look at them. The first one is contentment. People are content with the way things are. They're not necessarily ready to move on to another stage. They've got something invested in the way that they're doing things now. They prefer not to change at all. Thank you very much. It's not for me. The second room is the room of denial, which is a little stronger emotion, where people are saying, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. This is not for me. We don't need to do this. This is crazy. There's no reason why this has to happen. And by the way, it's not my fault. The third room that people are in is the room of confusion. They're maybe open to the change, but they're a little bit confused about what it means to them or how they should react and do things. And the fourth room is the room of renewal. This is often the people who came up with the idea in the first place. These are the ones who are hot to trot, ready to move and implement. And the good news is that you need these people in renewal to move things along, but the tendency of the people in the renewal space is to try to push the initiative of change far faster than the other three rooms can accommodate and catch up with. So often our change initiatives run out of speed because we leave too many people behind. So if you want to be purposeful about the change initiatives that you do that are impactful of people, it's really worth exploring with your team. Who sees this change response as sort of just difficult to accommodate, doesn't really want to move ahead? Understand the reasons why. It's a great tool for conversation. For those in denial, it's about answering their critical questions or having a compelling vision for how they can move into another room and towards the renewal space. For those in the confusion, it's really about answering their questions. They have questions about what this means to them, what are they supposed to do. This is your opportunity to do that. And the people in renewal are already committed to the action, they want to move ahead. So that makes them often the harder group to manage in a change initiative. But I would say that going with any kind of transformation is this understanding of where people's mindset are. You can use conversations to try to see where people are, just a great diagnostic tool to find out at the beginning of a change initiative where the mindset of the people most impacted by the change might be in that given moment. And you try to move them along so that the room of renewal gets expanded by the other people who are not yet ready to go there.
Cool. So, so the key question is, what will you do tomorrow and the next day in terms of getting ready? And so we've kind of want to ask this question. How would you apply these principles? And what problem do you want to solve? And let me give you an example. We're working with an organization, fairly large in the financial industry, and one of the people leading this came to us with some frustration that, she was brought in to kind of merge different cultures. The company had done lots of acquisition, but the one acquisition in particular hadn't gone that well. And they had separate emails, they had separate performance management systems, separate a lot of things, and they weren't integrating. It wasn't one organization, but this big organization, a smaller group. And she struggled with, how do I integrate the two? What do I do? And so she talked to us, we came up with 20 different possibilities potentially that could be helpful to her. And, some were easier, some were harder, but a little bit overwhelming. And so, collectively we said to her, what, as Steve mentioned, the big easy, what is easy to implement that has the greatest impact? And there's a matrix, you can see 4 quadrants. And we advise that for anybody when you're starting is take a big easy. What has the biggest impact and what is easy to implement? And so through trial and error, we came up with a performance system. And, she could have done a lot of things, but we said, let's look at this performance system. Let's create a unified product that can work. We can break down of all the things to do. We can break that performance management into certain pieces. It would be relatively easy to implement and the impact would be great. So that's what she did. She applied the breaking down from EBITDA and she applied the big E's restricted doing. So for the next 5 minutes, we like you, and unfortunately we don't have breakout rooms here. This program was really designed for in-person tables, things like that. But I'd like you to take 5 minutes in your own little mind, not little minds, sorry, in your minds, and think about what you'll do tomorrow. In your organization, what problem are you having? What itch do you need scratched? And just come up with some ideas of how you would apply these principles. What part of EBITDA, maybe 1 or 2, and what part of strategic doing, 1 or so of these things would work for you.
And how might you navigate the rooms of change with the people involved in that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So take about Go ahead.
We encourage people to be very playful with this, right? So you're not solving world
Yeah.
peace here. You're just kind of playing with these concepts. Just imagine a little something that's niggling you in your role as a leader in your organization. What's on your mind where these principles might have some insight and capability to help you solve it. So pick something and see if you can just relate an EBITDA principle, maybe with a strategic doing principle, and give some consideration to how you would manage that change effort. And we'll ask you to come back on in a couple of minutes, and hopefully one or two of you will share your thoughts with us.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, put them in the chat room if you're comfortable with that. Again, we are not able to see you face to face and have people stand up and use Post-its and things like that. So we'll do the best we can. But if you're comfortable, put a few in the chat room, and we'll review them then.
I do believe Tori said that people can unmute if they want to speak this rather than write it.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah. If anyone has anything that they really want to share, feel free to unmute yourself and share that.
Yeah, that might be better than trying to do it in the chat room. It's a little awkward in there, I think. So let's have you do it with an oral report.
Cool.
I feel like we should be playing the Jeopardy music right now.
Well, you're a songwriter, Steve. That would be your next song,
right.
I think.
Right.
Does anybody want to share what they've come up with? Again, we can't see everybody, so just unmute yourself and start verbalizing if you have your ideas. Quiet group.
They're thinking.
Okay.
I could kick things off. I have a quick one. If you guys would, if I could pass it by you guys.
Sure.
So for me, I would probably want to start with for the EBITDA, I'd probably start with the incremental and iterative improvements, followed by pairing that with a strategic doing of, drafting a short map plan to include everyone. I think, sometimes in some HR roles, the customer or the client isn't always, the standard employee that may be serving the actual client or customer, right? Like sometimes for HR, you have maybe more of an operational role, or maybe you are working really closely with other components of an HR department, like a payroll or a finance function, right? So I think sometimes there could be some disconnects in systems and data sharing that could benefit the rest of the teams. So I think that if you see a gap in those processes, it's a good opportunity to use those two strategies you guys are pointing out to not only create an incremental and iterative improvement plan, but also draft that as an action plan that breaks the goals down into bite-sized pieces to enable that collaboration or to enable that process efficiency to make everybody's jobs easier.
It's a good one.
I like very much, Ryan, I think it was you that said this about the notion of making this an inclusive process. We often don't think about that as an HR leader. It's a lonely place sometimes to work in HR in a business function because you think nobody else is interested in what you're doing. So if your change initiative does in fact have organizational wide capability, it's always better, I think, to make that as much of an inclusive process as you possibly can. Anybody else?
Okay.
Christina, I believe I gave you the ability to unmute yourself.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Christine.
Yes, we
Go
can.
ahead. Thank you.
So I think I'm kind of in a backtracking process right now in terms of what I'm thinking about what I will do tomorrow, because I think the issue of change that I'm facing would have been great if we had broken down the big problems first and framed the conversation better. And now I feel like we need to kind of backtrack with this one individual and make her have her break down what the actual big problems are and frame the problem right, because it definitely there was no real leadership going on in that conversation. So I guess I'm just thinking about this through that lens.
Yeah, Christine, is that because it was a kind of a spontaneous, unexpected reaction to what went on, or there was just not a lot of thoughtful consideration or time, maybe?
So I actually, before the meeting, I was able to identify that it didn't seem like we were ready to have the conversation, but we went forward with it anyway.
Anyway, right.
So we started putting breaking down some of the issues and putting a plan together, but we just didn't get to a good enough point to really frame the conversation better.
So the good news is you can circle back very quickly and try to fix whatever's next, right? You can't undo the past, but you certainly can apply what it is that we need to start to do now in order to get a better future. And so, maybe this, while you may not have had the opportunity to do these things before, you now have an opportunity to think about them now. So maybe you can spend a little bit more time on the reframing. The slowing down to slow down to speed up is that principle of sort of having the thoughtful deliberations before you move into action as much as you can. So maybe that's a time to think about who needs to be involved in tomorrow's decision, how are they going to be impacted by it, and how can we get them engaged and thinking holistically in the prospects of what it is we're going to do together. So, the good thing about the Agile process is that it's small, incremental, quick fixes to things, and then you move on. And so imagine that you had a failed experiment. Now you have a chance to fix it and do a better job in the next iteration.
Yeah, I would add on to that with Steve it's really is the age of experimentation, Christina. And so I wouldn't look at this as a failure. I would look at it as a learning experience, because quite frankly, we're all thrown in this new environment here, and we're going to make mistakes. And I found people are much more receptive to transparency, saying I didn't do it right. But from a personal mental perspective, you're not going to get everything right. And the beauty of Agile and breaking things down is it gives you a chance to admit that and improve and do better the next time. So just some thoughts.
Well, thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Christina. Would anybody else like to jump in and offer something?
Hi, my name is Jessica.
Hi, Jessica. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. What I would do tomorrow, well, my position is, I guess, is different. I'm in government, and everything is changing every day, every second. We're having nonstop meetings. So it's that ability to stay connected with all the news that is being presented, through SHRM, through other agencies, so that you can be effective in your role. Because as a leader, you're not going to be challenged with, you should know how to manage this situation. And we've had I guess 6 weeks of on the job training of how to address employee emotions, how to think about operations, how it affects taxpayers, what are we going to do to provide better customer service. So I think even as a leader, it is also my job to ensure that my staff is also being creative, being able to look at things in a different way, that, hey, we used to operate this way, but we're not operating that way anymore. And it's really creating that balance and that comfort that's saying, I can do this, and I know I have confidence in what I can do to be better. When I say better, I think in the chat, we talked about being better. It was more as challenging yourself, that every process could be changed. Every process, even the slightest process, could be changed to be better, to be easier. So not just easier for yourself, but also for the people involved. So it's a lot of changing and a lot of moving parts, where it's like my mind is constantly going, and it's it's a little bit hard because it's like you have to be informed and you have to stay connected. So like, how do you balance that?
Yeah. Well, Jessica, it sounds to me like you're doing a great job with that balance. I think you're both tapping into your warrior and your artist. You're driving for results and clarity of purpose, while at the same time you're paying attention to the needs of your people. So you're already, I think, sounds to me from what you said, you already have a good balance between your warrior and your artist self. So congratulations on that. Just rely on your instincts as you go forward with that. You know, if you think you're doing the right thing, you probably are. But if you're doing it in a thoughtful way and you're being considerate and you're using the right filters for the information that you get, and you're sure in your stance on things, then you're demonstrating a capacity to those you lead that you are a credible leader and that people will listen to you and follow you. So I'm encouraged by what you told us, even though it's a struggle right now. This is not a normal for anybody, and it may never be back to what we know as a normal. But the fact that you've recognized that there's tumult, maybe confusion, maybe denial going on in abundance right now, and your job is to sort through that as an emerging leader and help people find their path to renewal. And that's going to be, in many cases, given the current situation, that might be a very individualistic approach to that. But if you're in touch with the people that you lead, you'll help to guide them through whatever room they're currently in to the room of renewal.
Let me just add to that, Steve, that you know, in emergency, people tend to look to the leaders for their answers. It's like when you're captain of the ship in the calm sea, it's pretty easy, but when things get turbulent, it's not possible for a leader to know all the answers and what to do. And so what we've found in the course is you want to focus on what we call hidden assets. Your employees have skills, capabilities you're not aware of because it's not part of their job description. It's not what they work on a day, but they may have other capabilities, hobbies, preferences that they have that we can use. Here's an example. We're talking to one company, big company, trying to get a client, and she found out that this client has a big yoga fan. He really enjoys yoga. And she realized that two people on her team did yoga all the time, and they were really excited about it and do a lot about it. So she connected the two of them. And so by doing that, she was able to close the sale. So that's one example of looking for those hidden assets. Steve calls it below the iceberg. You know, the iceberg is a little piece on the top, but much more below. Look for those below the level assets of your team, because you can't do it all yourself. All you can do is do your best, be transparent, but look for those hidden assets that can help.
The other point of that, Wayne, is the notion. I love what you said earlier about, you know, what happens in a crisis often is well-meaning people in organizations go along in their day-to-day business and they don't think much about decision-making or leadership much at all. But when a crisis hits, that's exactly what they do. We suddenly become hierarchical, very dependent upon the people. And of course, that's a typical reaction. But what you want to be able to do, if you go back to work soon, start to build the capacity of the people that work with you and for you to be resilient in their own execution of their responsibilities. Start to teach those principles now, because the time to learn them is not when the emergency happens, but well before it happens. And it will happen again. So if you can go back to your workplace as an emerging leader and start to look at how resilient are the people that you worked with, were they able to cope? Were they able to come up and be creative and continue to do their jobs in an effective way? And if not, what did they need to help them grow the next time this comes along, so that when it happens again, you have some strength and capability and bench strength. Okay. Anybody else would like to take a turn? Please don't be shy.
Okay, not seeing any. Feel free to, if you want to put any comments in the chat, not comfortable speaking, we'll be glad to respond to them offline or reach out to Steve and myself. Steve, you want to say something?
Yeah, well, I'm thinking maybe since there's no one wants to step up with a particular case that they might be working on, maybe some people have some questions that they'd like us to ask, whether it's on the Agile principles, on strategic doing, on warrior artist, or on change. So If you have any questions, I don't know whether you collected any, Tori, in the Q&A portion of the meeting, but this might be a good time to turn to them if you have them.
We had one or two questions that Wayne had answered, so
Oh, okay.
those have been handled now in the Q&A section. So if anyone has any additional questions.
Yeah, we'll be around when we officially close the meeting, so you know, feel free to reach out. Let me one final slide here. So, you know, 3 key learnings. Agile HR is not IT. It's a practice adopted and modified for HR. It's not your CIO's IT function. Emerging leaders need to tap into both their inner warrior and artist. And Agile is a new way of thinking that requires an element of leadership. As a toolkit for you, on the right is kind of a representation of a toolkit we developed. It goes through great detail in terms of the key elements of an Agile HR program. We use this for our students. We use this with our clients. We love to have you take a look at it. It's free, no obligation. Talks about the trends. It talks about how you lead change. Talks about getting executive buy-in, building a business case, agile teams. Talks about the change management systems. It will be a great resource. Again, we believe in evangelizing the profession through Agile and leadership practices. And so by all means, if you want a copy, just let us know. You can see our emails there. We'll be glad to respond. And Steve, any final thoughts?
Well, I'd just like to say that, despite the miserableness of our current situation and the stuff that's going on, it is also a time to be thinking about what will life be like when we all return to some version of what comes next. And I think as an emerging leader in an organization, you have an incredible role to play in that. And I just encourage you not to sit back and wait for those above you to decide. Try to find a way to use your influence, your thoughtfulness, and maybe some of these skills that you learned today to try to broker and lead conversations in your organization that drive positively forward and inspire people to do their best work. I think we're going to have a lot of people who are potentially ripe to leave an organization because their organization didn't handle the contingencies around this work situation. They're already looking for other positions. And as soon as the economy opens up again, they're going to be ready to leap. You may have a retention issue when you return to work. And I think by quickly adopting a process where you are asking people and trolling through the experiences that people had to try to figure out when and if this happens again, how might we have the capabilities to be able to be resilient throughout it and be able to hold on to the very best people we have in the organization. Find a way to make that inclusive. I think that is a great way for an emerging leader in an organization to hold your bosses accountable for how they might be thinking about it, because their job is really to get back to the business of the business. And I don't think you want them to neglect what this experience has meant to so many. And how can you be a broker of that conversation and leave your mark in your organization as somebody who is both a great warrior and an artist in the way that you lead? So if there are there any further questions?
Yeah, there's one question, okay. Kevin. We have time for one more, I think, or a couple. All right, let me read this.
It looks like there's 2 questions.
Okay. There are a lot of factors changing in HR processes. What do you recommend for embracing that information and getting your team to also be involved in the process so that can be more involved in the changes that are coming? Think about this a second. Well, again, I go back to start out with hidden assets focus that I think most leaders don't get nearly enough productivity from their employees if they could, because they're focusing on, you know, what's written on the job description versus the hidden assets that individuals bring to the equation. And you know, people like information different ways. People communicate differently. Some like email, some like other means. But you know, you just really have to get more of your people involved. I think transparency, creating a safe environment, you're doing a safe place where people feel comfortable talking about things and connecting is a good option also. Steve, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, I worked for the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia for many years, and I cannot tell you the number of times as a leadership team, and in fact, even among our general staff, the amount of time that we have actually run drills on a potential pandemic hitting the city. It's part of the responsibility of the organization to make sure that we have a safe and sound financial system. But I was always intrigued that working for the Fed, that we thought about things differently than many organizations that I knew at the time. And now that I'm in the consulting world, I'm really an evangelist for having people to be reflective in situations like this. So I think a way to do this is to allow people upon a return of work to really think through what worked, what didn't work, what could you do better? Asking those 3 questions simply on the return to work of people, and trying to get an understanding of and planning therefore after that what is going to happen perhaps the next time. Because believe it or not, in your lifetime, I've lived through, I think, 3 types of disasters like this, where thank God we had contingencies. 9/11 was one, the financial crisis was another, and now the pandemic. But I felt good in the fact that we almost had what I would call a little simulator in the bank to practice and talk through how we would respond and react in these circumstances. So I think that's one way to do it, is to use it as a reflective experience, engage people from across your enterprise, mine it for its properties, and propose a new plan for how you'll deal with it the next time it comes up.
I think Dylan, did you want to respond also, I think? I thought I saw somebody there willing to respond with their viewpoint on that.
Oh, that's me. Sorry, Dylan, who owns the Zoom account.
No problem.
Tori in disguise.
That's Tori in disguise. I
In
think the
witness
last question
protection.
is, how would you use Agile to implement change? So to me, Agile is a way of working. And so if you take the components of a change initiative, you really need to implement those in a tactical way. And I think Agile has a way of breaking a big change effort into small pieces, getting people involved, incrementally improve it, and then scaling it. So the problem with many change initiatives is they're massive, they're large, and generally they don't work. But again, it's the main principle in Agile is breaking a big thing into small pieces. And most things can be done that way, not everything, but the vast majority. So if you have a big change initiative, I would break it down into small pieces. With our students, they had some really interesting case studies around that, and we encourage them, you're not going to change everything. Figure out whether it's a key constituent, a key department, a key program, break it down into areas that you can fix, and then apply some change principles to that. Anything you would add to that, Steve?
No, I think that's right. It's good to remember that it's not a substitute for visioning, right? It's once you've had a good vision for what it is that you need to change, then you start to get thoughtful about how do you make the process of this change workable for people. So it doesn't absolve you from doing thinking about strategy. It doesn't absolve you from doing thinking about the vision that you want. But once you've arrived at some conclusion about what matters and how you want to proceed, then this is a great way of conceptualizing the step forward to achieve the vision that you have. And I think that's the way to think about Agile, as a tool in your box, as opposed to the traditional methods of strategic planning, thinking, and execution.
Okay. Talking about being Agile, my power just went out. Can everybody still see my screen? Or
Yes.
no? Oh, okay. The lights flickered. That must have been something I said, but now it looks like it's okay. So, like I said, have to be Agile.
We can hear you.
All right. Everybody, I think we're, and I guess I can't see anybody anyway, but I want to thank you for the opportunity. Steve and I are available. If you want to reach out to us, we'll stay in a line for a few minutes here, or reach out to us through email. Love to be able to send you this toolkit if you have an interest. And again, it's a labor of love for us.
We're making the slides available too, right?
Make the slides available too, yes.
Yeah.
So Tori and Philly Sherm, thank you very much. I'm glad to be helpful and look forward to continuing the conversation.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank
We
you.
really appreciate you doing this presentation for us today. It was great and very insightful.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Well, this an email will go out with the slides attached, and I think we'll include contact information, Wayne and Steve, if anyone has any additional questions, if that's okay. And thank you all for attending. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right. Have a good one, and everyone stay safe.
Thank you.
Bye.
Next story. Are we off broadcast, Tori?